The disastrous encounter. Captain Marcus Reed had learned 3 important lessons during his 8 years hauling cargo across the galaxy. First, never trust a ship older than your grandfather. Second, always have an escape plan. Third, when your navigation system starts making sounds like a dying cat, you're probably about to have a very bad day. The Wandering Star was making that exact sound right now. Marcus slammed his fist against the control panel, which was the universal solution to technical problems according to every spacer he'd ever met. The navigation screen flickered, went dark, then displayed a message that made his stomach drop into his boots. Critical system failure. Engine shut down in 90 seconds. No, 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 Marcus muttered, his fingers flying across the holographic controls. Come on, baby. Not here. Anywhere but here. He was drifting through the outer edge of the Scarlet Void, a region of space that every sane pilot avoided like a plague ship. The nebula stretched before him in shades of deep red and purple, looking like someone had spilled wine across the stars. It was beautiful in the way that poisonous flowers were beautiful, attractive right up until it killed you. The stories about this place were legendary. Ships disappeared here. Entire convoys had vanished without sending a single distress signal. And everyone knew why. This was Zyrena's hunting ground. Marcus had heard the tales in every space station bar from here to the outer rim. Zyrena the Merciless. Zyrena the Blood Queen. The vampire warlord who had carved out her own empire in the lawless reaches of space. They said she had personally killed over 1,000 beings. They said her ship was decorated with the bones of her enemies. They said she once executed an entire diplomatic envoy because one of them sneezed during her speech. Marcus had always assumed the stories were exaggerated. Right now, staring at his dying ship's controls, he really hoped they were exaggerated. The engine made a sound like someone tearing metal in half, and every light on his ship went dark except for the emergency systems. The Wandering Star shuddered, then went silent. Dead in space. In the worst possible location. Marcus sat in the darkness, listening to his own breathing and the faint hum of life support. His cargo hold was full of medical supplies destined for a colony on the edge of human space. Legal cargo for once, which meant legitimate credits waiting for him. 3 months of work and now he was stranded in a cosmic graveyard. Okay, he said to the empty cockpit. Okay, this is fine. I'll just restart the backup systems, send a distress signal to the nearest station and wait for rescue. Simple plan. Nothing can go wrong with that plan. Everything went wrong with that plan. His proximity alarm screamed to life, the sound drilling into his skull. Marcus spun toward the sensor display and felt his blood turn to ice. Something massive was approaching from deep within the nebula. The contact was huge, easily 50 times the size of his transport ship. Through the viewport, he watched as the vessel emerged from the crimson clouds like a nightmare taking physical form. The ship was black as the void between stars, its hull decorated with what looked like skeletal structures that gleamed white against the darkness. Massive spines jutted from its surface, and the front of the ship was shaped like a grinning skull with empty eye sockets that glowed with red light. The Crimson Devourer. Zyrena's flagship. Marcus had seen pictures, grainy images captured by survivors and lucky traders who had glimpsed the ship from a distance. None of those images had captured how absolutely terrifying it looked in person. This wasn't just a ship. It was a statement. A promise of violence written in metal and bone. I'm going to die, Marcus whispered. I'm actually going to die. A tractor beam locked onto the Wandering Star with a lurch that sent Marcus sprawling across his cockpit. He grabbed the edge of his pilot's chair and watched helplessly as his ship was pulled toward the massive vessel like a fish on a line. The skull's jaw opened, revealing a docking bay that looked disturbingly organic. His ship was dragged inside, and the massive doors sealed shut behind him with the finality of a tomb closing. Through his viewport, Marcus could see figures moving in the dim red lighting of the docking bay. Tall, pale figures with movements that were too smooth, too graceful to be human. Vampires. Actual vampires. Because apparently the universe had decided that simply stranding him in space wasn't dramatic enough. Marcus stood on shaking legs and moved toward his ship's small armory. He had a plasma pistol, standard issue for any trader who traveled the dangerous routes. His hand closed around the grip, and for a moment he considered making a stand. Then he remembered the 1,000 beings Zyrena had supposedly killed and put the gun back. Fighting would just make his death faster, and he wasn't quite ready to rush toward the end. The airlock door exploded inward. Not opened, exploded. Vampires clearly didn't believe in knocking. 3 figures entered his ship, moving with predatory confidence. They were humanoid but clearly not human. Their skin was pale gray, Their eyes reflected the red emergency lighting like cats, and when one of them smiled at him, Marcus saw rows of sharp teeth designed for tearing flesh. Marcus Reed, the lead vampire said, consulting a small holographic display. Independent trader. No criminal warrants. No outstanding bounties. How disappointing. You're not even worth killing for sport. I've always been an underachiever, Marcus heard himself say. His mouth was apparently operating independently from his brain's survival instincts. It's kind of my thing. The vampire tilted his head, studying Marcus like he was a curious insect. The Empress wants to see you. You should feel honored. Most people only meet her once, very briefly, right before they die. Great, Marcus said. I've always wanted to meet celebrities right before my violent death. Really checks off a bucket list item. The vampires grabbed him, their grip like iron bands around his arms, and dragged him out of his ship. The docking bay was enormous, filled with other captured vessels in various states of disassembly. Marcus saw a luxury yacht that had been torn open like a can of food, a military corvette missing its entire engine section, and what looked like the remains of a passenger liner. None of this boded well for his future. They pulled him through corridors that seemed designed by someone who really understood psychological warfare. The walls were black metal threaded with veins of bioluminescent crimson that pulsed like a heartbeat. The air smelled like copper and something else, something organic and wrong. Other vampires watched him pass with hungry expressions, and Marcus tried very hard not to make eye contact with any of them. The throne room doors were massive slabs of metal covered in carved symbols that hurt to look at directly. They opened with a hydraulic hiss that sounded like a giant breathing, and Marcus was shoved inside. The room was larger than anything that should exist inside a ship. The ceiling disappeared into darkness far above, and the floor was polished black stone that reflected the red lighting in disturbing ways. Dozens of figures lined the walls, Zyrena's court, all watching him with expressions ranging from hungry to curious to contemptuous. At the far end of the chamber, elevated on a platform made from what looked like salvaged spacecraft parts and bones, sat a throne. And on that throne sat the most terrifying being Marcus had ever seen. Zyrena was tall, easily 7 feet, with deep crimson skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Her armor was black composite material decorated with bones from creatures Marcus couldn't identify, some of them definitely humanoid. Her hair was long and black, falling past her shoulders in waves that seemed to move without wind. But it was her eyes that truly captured his attention. They glowed with golden red light, burning like twin suns, ancient and merciless. She radiated power the way a star radiated heat. This wasn't just danger. This was inevitability. Death given form and purpose. Marcus was dragged forward and forced to his knees. The stone floor was cold beneath him. He could feel every eye in the room focused on him, could hear the whispers of the court members speculating about how long he would last. Zyrena rose from her throne in one fluid motion and descended the steps. Each footfall echoed through the chamber like a countdown. She moved around him slowly, studying him from every angle. Marcus kept his eyes forward, too terrified to turn his head. "A traitor," she said, her voice low and resonant, the kind of voice that made you listen even when you didn't want to. "Drifting through my territory with a hold full of medical supplies. Legal cargo. How refreshingly boring." "I try to keep things simple," Marcus managed to say. His voice only cracked a little. "Boring is good. Boring means staying alive." "And yet here you are," Zyrena said, stopping in front of him. "In the least boring place in the galaxy. How did that happen?" "Engine failure," Marcus said. "Wrong place, wrong time. I'm very good at being in wrong places at wrong times. It's practically a talent." One of her court members, a gaunt vampire with elaborate facial tattoos, leaned forward. "My Empress, his ship's systems are worthless. His cargo is barely worth the effort of unloading. He's nothing. Less than nothing." "Less than nothing," Zyrena repeated, her burning eyes still fixed on Marcus. "An interesting assessment. What do you think, traitor? Are you less than nothing?" Marcus's brain was screaming at him to say something smart, something that would convince her to let him go. But his mouth, which had never learned to cooperate with his brain during stressful situations, decided to go in a different direction. "I mean, I've got my moments," he said. "I once talked my way past 3 customs inspections in one day. I convinced a Krillian crime boss that his missing cargo was actually his accountant's fault. I survived a reactor meltdown using nothing but duct tape and a really optimistic attitude. So I'd say I'm at least something. Maybe not a big something, but definitely more than nothing." The throne room went quiet. Marcus could feel the temperature drop as Zyrena's expression shifted into something that might have been interest or might have been the look a cat gets right before it plays with a mouse. "Confidence," she said softly. "How refreshing. Most people beg for their lives when brought before me. They plead, they cry, they offer me things they don't have. But you're making a case for your value." She leaned down, bringing her face level with his. Up close, she was even more terrifying, and Marcus's treacherous brain noted, absolutely stunning in a way that made his survival instincts very confused. Her skin was flawless, her features sharp and elegant, her eyes like molten gold. "Give me one reason," Zyrena said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper, "why I shouldn't drain every drop of blood from your body right now." This was it. The moment where Marcus needed to be smart, diplomatic, and convincing. His life literally depended on saying exactly the right thing. His brain, which had been frantically trying to formulate a plan, suddenly went completely offline. Static. Nothing but panic and the overwhelming awareness that he was staring into the face of the most dangerous being in known space. And she was, objectively speaking, absolutely gorgeous. That thought, completely inappropriate and utterly unhelpful, took over his entire consciousness. His higher brain functions evacuated the premises. His mouth, left unsupervised, decided to share his thoughts with the entire room. "You're so sexy," Marcus blurted out. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that exists in the moment before a star goes supernova. Total, absolute, and preceding something catastrophic. Marcus's brain returned just long enough to realize what had happened, then immediately abandoned ship again, this time screaming. Every vampire in the throne room froze. The court members stopped their whispering. The guards' hands moved toward their weapons. Even the bioluminescent veins in the walls seemed to pulse faster, as if the ship itself was shocked. Zyrena remained perfectly still, her burning eyes locked on Marcus's face. Her expression was completely unreadable, which was somehow more terrifying than anger would have been. "I'm sorry," Marcus heard himself babble, his voice climbing toward panic. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean that. My brain stopped working. Complete system failure. If I could travel back in time 30 seconds, I would punch myself unconscious to prevent those words from leaving my mouth." "Silence," Zyrena said quietly, but the word cut through his rambling like a blade through tissue. Marcus silenced. His heart was trying to break through his ribcage. He could see one of the guards drawing a weapon that looked like it had been specifically designed to cause maximum pain. Several court members were smiling in a way that suggested they were already planning what to do with his remains. Zyrena took a step back, still staring at him. She tilted her head slightly, like she was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't make sense. Then, incredibly, impossibly, the corner of her mouth twitched upward. It started as the smallest movement, barely visible. But then it grew. Her lips curved into a smile. Not the cruel smile of a predator about to strike, but something genuine and surprised. Her shoulders began to shake. And then Zyrena, the most feared warlord in the galaxy, the Empress of the Scarlet Void, the being who had personally killed 1,000 enemies, laughed. It started quiet, almost like she was trying to hold it back. But then it escaped, full and rich and completely genuine. The sound echoed through the throne room, and every single member of her court stared in absolute shock. Marcus had no idea what to do. His brain had given up entirely and was now just playing static. He knelt on the cold floor, watching the galaxy's most dangerous woman laugh at his catastrophically stupid panic response, and wondered if maybe he'd already died and this was some kind of bizarre afterlife. The laughter continued for several long seconds before Zyrena finally regained her composure. She wiped one eye, her expression still holding traces of genuine amusement, and looked down at Marcus with something that might have been curiosity. "In 500 years, she said, her voice still holding hints of laughter, "no one has ever said anything like that to me. Most people are too busy screaming or begging. But you." She paused, studying him with new interest. "You panic, and your brain decides the appropriate response is to comment on my appearance. It's a survival mechanism," Marcus said weakly. "A terrible, terrible survival mechanism that has never worked before and clearly isn't working now." Zyrena circled him again, but this time her movements seemed less predatory and more thoughtful. "What's your name, traitor?" "Marcus Reed, ma'am." "Your Highness. Your terrifying majesty. I don't actually know the proper title for an empress of vampires." "Zyrena will do," she said, which shocked her entire court into collective gasps. She ignored them. "Well, Marcus Reed, you've presented me with an interesting dilemma. I can't simply let you go. That would suggest weakness. But executing you seems wasteful now. You've entertained me, which is more than most of my court manages in a month." She stopped in front of her throne, one hand resting on the armrest decorated with bones. I'm going to make you an offer, Marcus Reed. You can die here quickly and cleanly for wasting my time. Or you can live and serve as my entertainment until you inevitably say something that makes me kill you anyway. Choose. Marcus looked up at her, at the burning gold eyes and the slight smile still playing at the corner of her lips, and realized he'd just been given the galaxy's strangest job offer. I choose living, he said. Definitely living. I'm very good at being entertaining. Accidentally. Usually at my own expense. But still. Zyrena's smile widened slightly, showing just a hint of her fangs. Excellent. Welcome to the Crimson Devourer, Marcus Reed. Try not to die in the next 24 hours. I find watching humans panic to be far more interesting than I expected. As guards moved forward to take him away, not to execution but to quarters, Marcus realized his catastrophic mistake might have just saved his life. He'd complimented the most dangerous woman in the galaxy, and somehow, impossibly, she'd found it amusing rather than insulting. He had no idea what would happen next, but for the first time since his ship had broken down, Marcus Reed felt like he might actually survive this disaster. Assuming, of course, his mouth didn't get him killed in the next few hours. Unexpected consequences. The quarters they assigned Marcus were surprisingly comfortable, which somehow made everything more terrifying. He'd expected a cell with bars and chains, maybe some decorative bloodstains on the walls to set the mood. Instead, he got a room with an actual bed, a viewport showing the swirling red nebula outside, and furniture that looked like it had been salvaged from a luxury liner. The guard who'd escorted him, a vampire woman with silver hair and scars across her neck, pointed to a panel on the wall. Food dispenser. Water supply. Waste facilities through that door. The Empress wants you rested and healthy. For now. That last part really undercuts the hospitality, Marcus said, then immediately regretted opening his mouth. The guard just smiled, showing far too many teeth, and left. The door sealed behind her with a hiss that sounded disturbingly final. Marcus stood alone in his new quarters, his mind finally processing what had just happened. He'd insulted the galaxy's most dangerous warlord to her face, she'd laughed, and now he was apparently her pet entertainment. What is my life? He asked the empty room. The room wisely didn't answer. Marcus collapsed onto the bed, which was far more comfortable than his bunk on the Wandering Star had ever been. He stared at the ceiling, watching shadows from the nebula play across the metal panels, and tried to make sense of his situation. Every instinct told him to find a way off the ship, to escape before Zyrena got bored and decided he'd outlived his entertainment value. But there was something else nagging at his mind. The way she'd laughed. It hadn't been the cruel mockery of a predator toying with prey. It had been genuine surprise, real amusement, like she'd heard something she didn't expect and couldn't help but find it funny. 500 years, she'd said. No one had ever said anything like that to her in 500 years. Marcus sat up suddenly. 500 years meant Zyrena was ancient by human standards, had probably ruled this territory longer than some civilizations existed. How many people in that time had approached her with fear, with calculated respect, with carefully chosen words designed to appease or manipulate? And he just blurted out the truth, unfiltered and idiotic, because his brain had abandoned all pretense of self-preservation. I'm going to die here, Marcus muttered. But at least it'll make a good story. Assuming anyone survives to tell it. A chime sounded at his door. Before Marcus could respond, it slid open, revealing a vampire he recognized from the throne room. The gaunt one with facial tattoos who'd called him worthless. Up close, Marcus could see the tattoos were actually scars, deliberately carved in intricate patterns. The vampire's eyes were pure black, which was somehow more unnerving than the red glow most of the others had. Human, the vampire said, his voice dripping with contempt. I am Karzan, first commander of the Crimson Fleet. The Empress wishes to see you in her private chambers. Marcus's stomach dropped. Is this the part where she kills me? If the Empress wanted you dead, you would already be dead. This is the part where you obey without question, or I demonstrate why questioning is inadvisable. Karzan's smile showed rows of needle-sharp teeth. Choose quickly. Leading the way sounds great, Marcus said, standing on shaky legs. I love following people to unknown locations on ships full of vampires. It's basically my hobby. Karzan's expression suggested he didn't appreciate sarcasm, but he turned and walked into the corridor without another word. Marcus followed, trying to map the route in his mind. Escape planning was probably futile, but old habits died hard. The corridors of the Crimson Devourer were a maze of black metal and pulsing red light. They passed other crew members, All of them vampire, all of them watching Marcus with expressions ranging from curiosity to hunger. One female vampire licked her lips as he walked by, and Marcus decided not to think too hard about what that meant. They climbed several levels, the corridors becoming wider and more ornate. The bone decorations here were more elaborate, arranged in patterns that might have been artistic or might have been warnings. Finally, Karzan stopped before a massive door carved with symbols that seemed to shift when Marcus wasn't looking directly at them. "The Empress's private quarters," Karzan said. "You will show proper respect. You will not touch anything. You will speak only when spoken to. And if you say anything as catastrophically stupid as you did in the throne room, I will personally ensure your death takes several days." He paused. "Are we clear?" "Crystal clear," Marcus said. "Respect, no touching, quiet unless asked, don't be an idiot. I can probably manage 3 out of 4 of those." Karzan made a sound that might have been a growl or might have been a laugh, then pressed his hand against the door. It slid open silently, revealing a room that was nothing like Marcus had expected. Zyrena's private chambers were vast, but unlike the throne room's intimidating darkness, this space had warmth to it. The walls were lined with shelves holding artifacts from dozens of worlds. Ancient books, crystalline sculptures, weapons from civilizations Marcus didn't recognize. A massive viewport took up one entire wall, showing the swirling beauty of the scarlet void beyond. Zyrena stood at the viewport, her back to the door. She'd removed her bone-decorated armor and wore something simpler, a long black coat that fell to her ankles over dark clothing. Her hair was loose, and without the armor she looked less like a warlord and more like someone who might actually be capable of normal conversation. "Thank you, Karzan," she said without turning. "You may leave." Karzan bowed, shot Marcus one more warning glare and departed. The door sealed behind him with a soft hiss. Marcus stood awkwardly near the entrance, unsure what to do with his hands. Zyrena continued staring out the viewport, silent. The seconds stretched into uncomfortable territory. "So," Marcus finally said because his mouth had never learned when to stay closed. "Nice view. Very red. Lots of nebula. Really captures the whole cosmic horror aesthetic you've got going." Zyrena turned to face him, and Marcus was struck again by how different she looked without the armor. Still dangerous, still clearly capable of killing him with her bare hands, but there was something else there. Something that might have been loneliness buried under 5 centuries of being feared. "Do you know why I laughed earlier?" she asked. "Because I said something monumentally stupid? Because you were honest." Zyrena moved away from the viewport, walking toward a low table surrounded by cushions. "Everyone who comes before me lies. They lie about their intentions, their fears, their thoughts. They tell me what they think I want to hear. But you..." She gestured for him to sit. "Your brain stopped working and you told me exactly what you thought in that moment. No filter. No calculation. Just pure, unfiltered honesty." Marcus carefully sat on one of the cushions, feeling extremely out of place. Zyrena poured liquid from a crystalline decanter into 2 glasses. The liquid was deep red, and Marcus tried not to think too hard about what it might be. "It's wine," Zyrena said, reading his expression. "From a vineyard on Thessar Prime. I'm not offering you blood, Marcus. I'm not a monster from your human horror stories." "The bone decorations suggest otherwise," Marcus said, then winced. "Sorry?" Mouth working faster than brain again. "The bones are tactical," Zyrena said, handing him a glass. "They make people afraid. Fear is useful. It prevents conflicts before they start. Most beings see my ship and run rather than fight. That saves lives, ironically enough." She sat across from him, her golden eyes studying his face. "But you didn't run when I asked you that question in the throne room. Your ship was dead. You had nowhere to go. You knew you were probably going to die. And your final thought was a compliment." Marcus took a sip of wine, which was actually excellent, and tried to process this conversation. "In my defense, my final thought was more like screaming static in your face. The compliment just sort of fell out." 500 years, Zyrena said quietly. "I've ruled this territory for 500 years. I've conquered worlds, destroyed fleets, built an empire from blood and determination. And in all that time, do you know how many people have looked at me and seen anything other than a monster?" Marcus stayed quiet, sensing this wasn't actually a question he should answer. "None," Zyrena continued. "My own people fear me. My enemies hate me. Diplomats treat me like a barely controlled weapon. Everyone sees the warlord, the killer, the threat. No one sees." She trailed off, taking a drink from her own glass. "A person?" Marcus offered quietly. Zyrena's eyes snapped to his face, and for a moment Marcus thought he'd overstepped. Then her expression softened slightly. A person, she repeated. Yes. Someone who might appreciate being called attractive rather than terrifying for once. Marcus felt like he was navigating a minefield while blindfolded. For what it's worth, you're definitely both. Terrifying and attractive. It's a confusing combination. My brain didn't know how to process it, which is why it basically exploded. A small smile tugged at Zyrena's lips. Your honesty is refreshing even when it's awkward. My court spends so much time flattering me with carefully crafted words that mean nothing. But you? You panic and blurt out exactly what you're thinking. It's almost charming. I wouldn't call it charming, Marcus said. It's gotten me into trouble more times than I can count. I once told a customs inspector that her perfume smelled like engine cleaner. That inspection took 6 hours. Zyrena actually laughed at that, a genuine sound that transformed her features. What happened after? She found 3 violations that technically weren't violations, but she made them violations out of spite. Cost me a week's profit and my dignity. Marcus relaxed slightly, the wine and conversation making him forget momentarily that he was talking to someone who could kill him without effort. But I learned an important lesson. What lesson? That I should never be allowed to speak to authority figures without adult supervision. Zyrena's smile widened. She refilled both their glasses and Marcus noticed her hands. They were elegant, artistic almost, not at all what he'd expect from someone with her reputation. No scars, no calluses. Just long fingers wrapped around a wine glass. Tell me about yourself, Marcus Reed, Zyrena said, settling back against her cushion. How does an honest idiot end up flying through the most dangerous region of space? Poor life choices mostly, Marcus said. I bought a cargo ship with money I'd saved working station maintenance. Figured I'd make my fortune hauling goods between colonies. Turns out the shipping business is harder than it looks. The profitable routes are controlled by the big corporations. The independent routes barely pay enough to cover fuel. And the really profitable routes are usually profitable because they're incredibly illegal. Hence the medical supplies, Zyrena said. Hence the medical supplies. Legal cargo, legitimate destination, barely enough profit to repair my ship and eat for a month. But it was honest work. Marcus paused. Well, honestish. I may have skipped a few inspection stations to save on fees. A smuggler with a conscience. How unusual. I prefer opportunistic trader with flexible morals. Marcus surprised himself by actually smiling. What about you? How does someone become the most feared warlord in the galaxy? Is there a school for that? A training program? Zyrena's expression darkened slightly. You're born into the wrong circumstances and make the best of them. My people, the Vyrathai, were conquered by the Stellar Consortium 300 years before I was born. We were slaves, property, things to be used and discarded. I grew up watching my people die in mining operations, factories, war fleets. We had no value except as tools. Marcus stayed quiet, sensing the weight behind her words. I escaped when I was young, barely more than a child by my people's standards. Stole a ship, gathered others like me. We started raiding consortium vessels, taking what we needed to survive. Over time we grew stronger. Other species joined us, refugees and criminals and those who had nowhere else to go. The Scarlet Void became our home because no one else wanted it. Zyrena's eyes reflected the red nebula light. The reputation came later. The stories, the fear. I cultivated it because fear keeps my people safe. No one attacks us if they think we're monsters. But you're not monsters, Marcus said quietly. No. We're survivors. But survival requires being willing to do monstrous things. She looked directly at him. I have killed Marcus. Many times. I will kill again if necessary. That part of the stories is true. I don't doubt it, Marcus said. But there's a difference between killing because you enjoy it and killing because you have to. You laughed when I said something stupid. Monsters don't laugh. They don't collect artifacts from different worlds or drink wine while having actual conversations. They definitely don't keep annoying human traders alive for entertainment. Zyrena tilted her head, studying him with an expression that might have been curiosity. You're not what I expected, Marcus Reed. I get that a lot. Usually right before something explodes or someone tries to arrest me. A chime sounded through the room, a low tone that made Zyrena's expression immediately shift to something harder. She stood in one fluid motion, all traces of the conversational person vanishing behind the warlord's mask. Report, she said, her voice carrying authority that could cut steel. A holographic display materialized in the center of the room, showing Karzan's face. My Empress, we have a situation. A consortium battle group just entered the outer edge of the Scarlet Void. 3 heavy cruisers, multiple support vessels. They're demanding we surrender immediately. Marcus felt his blood run cold. The Stellar Consortium was the largest military power in this sector of space. If they were here in force, this was about to become a battlefield. Zyrena's expression didn't change. How long until they reach weapons range? 30 minutes, Empress. Prepare the fleet for combat. I want fighters ready to launch and all defensive systems online. I'll be on the bridge in 5 minutes. She ended the call and turned to Marcus. It seems our conversation is over. The consortium is here for you? Marcus asked, standing. They've been trying to eliminate me for 2 centuries. This is just their latest attempt. Zyrena moved toward a panel on the wall, which opened to reveal her armor. You should return to your quarters. This will likely get violent. Or, Marcus said, his stupid mouth working before his brain could stop it, I could help. Zyrena paused, her hands on her armor. Help? You're a cargo trader with a broken ship. What could you possibly do against a consortium battle group? I know their ships, Marcus said, the words tumbling out as an actual plan formed in his mind. I worked consortium stations for years before I bought my ship. I know their standard formations, their communication protocols, their defensive patterns. I'm not saying I can win the battle for you, but I might know things your tactical officers don't. Zyrena studied him with those burning gold eyes, and Marcus could see her calculating, weighing his potential value against the risk. Finally she smiled slightly. You continue to surprise me, Marcus Reed. Very well. You'll come to the bridge. But if you prove to be more hindrance than help, I'll have Karzan throw you out an airlock. Fair enough, Marcus said, then realized what he'd just agreed to. He was about to voluntarily walk into a space battle on a vampire warship against one of the galaxy's most powerful military forces. His survival instincts, wherever they'd gone, were definitely on vacation. Zyrena donned her armor with practiced efficiency, each piece locking into place with soft clicks. The bone decorations gleamed in the red light, and once again she looked every inch the feared warlord. She turned to Marcus, now fully transformed back into the Empress of the Scarlet Void. Try to keep up, she said, moving toward the door. And Marcus? If we survive this, we're going to have a longer conversation about why you keep volunteering to help someone who terrifies you. Honestly? Marcus said, following her into the corridor. I have no idea. My brain clearly stopped working hours ago and hasn't come back. Zyrena's laugh echoed through the corridor as they moved toward the bridge. Behind them, klaxons began sounding throughout the ship. The Crimson Devourer was going to war, and Marcus Reed, cargo trader and professional idiot, was somehow right in the middle of it. As they ran through the corridors, Marcus caught glimpses of the crew preparing for battle. Vampires checking weapons, technicians manning stations, fighter pilots sprinting toward launch bays. The entire ship had transformed from a vessel of terror into a precisely coordinated war machine. They reached the bridge, a massive space dominated by holographic displays showing the approaching consortium fleet. Officers called out reports, updating Zyrena on shield status, weapon readiness, fighter deployments. Marcus stood near the entrance, trying not to get in anyone's way. Zyrena took her position at the center of the bridge, her presence immediately commanding every person's attention. Status. Consortium fleet at 28 minutes to weapons range, Empress, an officer reported. They're broadcasting a demand for your unconditional surrender. How predictable. Zyrena's eyes scanned the tactical display, taking in fleet positions, vectors, deployment patterns. Marcus, come here. Marcus hurried forward, very aware that every vampire on the bridge was watching him with expressions ranging from confusion to hostility. He reached Zyrena's side and she gestured to the display. You said you know their patterns. Explain what you see. Marcus studied the hologram, his years of watching consortium operations suddenly becoming relevant. They're using a standard assault wedge. Heavy cruisers in front to absorb fire, support vessels behind providing electronic warfare and point defense. It's their textbook approach to engagement with hostile forces. Which means? Zyrena prompted. Which means they're either underestimating you or they're overconfident. This formation is designed for overwhelming weaker opponents with superior firepower. It doesn't account for an enemy that might actually fight back effectively. Marcus pointed to gaps in the formation. Their flanks are vulnerable. If you could get fighters through here and here, you could hit their support vessels before the heavy cruisers could react. Karzan, standing at a tactical station, sneered. The human thinks he can direct our military strategy? Absurd. The human has a point, Zyrena said, studying the gaps Marcus had indicated. We've been predictable too, meeting force with force. They expect us to charge their center. If we don't. She began issuing orders rapid fire, repositioning her fleet into a formation that would exploit the weaknesses Marcus had identified. The minutes ticked down. The consortium fleet grew larger on the displays. Marcus stood beside Zyrena, watching a woman who'd lived 500 years orchestrate a battle against impossible odds, and realized something that terrified him almost as much as the approaching battle. He was starting to trust her. More than that, he was starting to like her. The warlord who'd laughed at his stupid compliment, who'd shared wine and conversation, who'd listened to his tactical observations instead of dismissing him. This was either the start of the most unlikely friendship in the galaxy or the most elaborate way anyone had ever gotten themselves killed. Marcus, Zyrena said quietly, her eyes still on the tactical display. When this is over, assuming we survive, remind me to explain why keeping you alive was actually the smartest decision I've made in years. And if we don't survive? She smiled, showing just a hint of fangs. Then at least we'll have one hell of a story to tell in whatever afterlife awaits. The consortium fleet reached weapons range. The first shots lit up the void. And Marcus Reed, who'd started the day as a simple cargo trader, found himself in the middle of a space battle alongside the galaxy's most dangerous woman, all because his brain had stopped working at exactly the right moment. The battle had begun.